All right, well, welcome everybody to the November call, and I particularly wanted to welcome the new groups. So in Australia, we started 2 new chapters since last month's call, Haslick and Pierce. In Mexico City, Mexico. In Louisiana, 3 new chapters. So the Southern Energy Freedom Tour really paid off in a big way. Baton Rouge, Hammond, and Lafayette. So congratulations, everybody in Louisiana. In Maryland, Annapolis. In Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi. Welcome to all of you. That's really a big step for us. Missoula, Montana. Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And Houston, Southwest Sugar Land, Texas. So if you're one of those new chapters, welcome. It's great to have you here. What I'll be doing in just a moment is introducing Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, who you could say is our favorite climate scientist, but is probably closer just to our favorite person, and we're so happy that she could be available. Her travel schedule is absolutely crazy these days, and that she could carve out time to be on the call today, I think is really important, and we're really happy that she could join us. This has been a hard week, and I have spent a lot of time listening to a lot of people. And I'm just going to point to some of the categories that people have been talking to me about. Some people are in an enormous amount of pain, feeling like a certain line of decency was crossed. And I would have to say that my wife and my daughter are in that case, in that place, and that's been painful for me up close to see it not only with so many volunteers, but with my family. I've had people who called me who were extremely encouraged because Carlos Curbelo won his reelection. You know, keeping the Republican co-chair of the Climate Solutions Caucus was important. And Mr. Curbelo was in a district that has a lot more Democrats than Republicans, so that was really, really important. I've had people who contacted me because they were blown away by the generous statements made by Mr. Obama and Mrs. Clinton. I've talked to the people from I-7332 in Washington, Yoram Bauman, Carbon Washington, you know, an underfunded small grassroots organization that got over 40% of the vote there. And the main thing Yoram said back to me was, we'll win next time. I've contacted people who had people reach out to me who said, should we reevaluate everything? And that's always a fair question, but you don't do it when emotions are raw. So I do have a staff retreat coming up. We'll ask ourselves hard questions, but I appreciate the things that people brought up in that area. If people want to know what's our immediate answer is this. On Tuesday, we will have 289 people on Capitol Hill. We have 346 appointments. 198 of those are with Republican offices. Our path to legislation was always through Republican offices, and that doesn't change with us with the House and Senate. In fact, in the committees of jurisdiction, the committees that are most important to us, Energy and Commerce, we're seeing 46 of 53 offices for 87%. Energy and Natural Resources, 18 of 22 for 82%. Environment and Public Works, 18 of 20 for 90%, and Finance, 24 of 26 for 92%, and Ways and Means, 33 of 39 for 85%. I also want to say how much so many people sent such remarkable words of encouragement. I love this quote that Mary Selkirk sent from Václav Havel. She says, either we have hope within us or we don't. It is a dimension of the soul, and it is not essentially dependent upon some particular observation of the world. It is an orientation of the spirit, an orientation of the heart. It transcends the world that is immediately experienced and is anchored somewhere beyond its horizons. Hope is this deep and powerful sense, is not the same thing as joy that things are going well, or the willingness to invest in enterprises that are obviously headed for early success, but rather an ability to work for something because it is good, not just because it stands a chance to succeed. Hope is definitely not the same thing as optimism. It is not a conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. It is hope above all, which gives the strength to live and continually try new things. And then the other thing that I have to say that was actually most heartening for me this week was, you know, Ricky Bradley, who hosts the calls, one of our staff members, he said to me yesterday, you know, Mark, I've always wanted to be you. I just don't want to be you right now. I thought that was hysterical. So, Dr. Hayhoe, thank you so much for making yourself available. I do want to give you a chance to make some opening comments. We had some questions we discussed, and then hopefully we'll get a chance to entertain some questions in the chat. But again, if anybody was either at our conference 2 years ago or hasn't seen that speech, you can't be seen too many times. You can't listen to it too many times. It's a remarkable expression of everything we're working on. So Dr. Hayhoe, good morning and welcome, or good afternoon, I guess, from Toronto.
Yeah, thank you. Those were great words from Mark, and I think they contain the word that we need to hear, which is hope. Hope is not the same as circumstances. It's not the same as happiness. Hope is what gives us the long-term motivation to continue. So as a climate scientist, in our community, people are worried. In the United States, people are thinking, you know, we've already been on the chopping block for so long. What's going to happen the next 8 years? I don't know, but I do know that climate science is different than climate solutions. And what I've been thinking about the last few days is some of the incredible conversations that I have had with people all over, not just Texas, not just the US, people all over the world who don't agree with me on the science, who say, you know, I just can't buy this thing. I think it's just a natural cycle, or it's all going to be okay in the end. And those conversations have inevitably turned, however, sometimes with a little assistance, to talking about solutions. And the farmer who says it's just a natural cycle says, I can't wait to get wind turbines on my land. The engineer who says, I don't buy this whole thing, says, do you know that I actually make all my Christmas presents by hand? And our family has downsized to a smaller house, and we actually even got rid of our car because we believe in living a sustainable lifestyle. And when you look at the Yale Public Opinion Climate Maps, if you haven't seen that, it's a really cool tool where the people at Yale, Tony Lizerowitz and his team who do the 6 Americas of Global Warming, they've gone through and they've asked people all around the country, do you think climate is changing? Do you think humans are responsible? Do you think carbon should be regulated as a pollutant? Do you think we should be investing in renewables? And you can track this information not just down to the state, but down to the individual congressional district. So you can get numbers for what people think by district. And when you ask people, do you think humans are the main reason why climate is changing? The biggest part of the country is blue. And blue means less than 50% of people saying yes. But when you ask people, do you think carbon dioxide should be regulated as a pollutant? The vast majority of the country, just about every single congressional district, is a dark orange. That means, you know, over 70% of people say yes. Why do they say yes if they don't think it's causing climate change? Doesn't matter. What matters is the solutions. And so what's so encouraging about CCL is, number one, there is a solution. And number two is that solution really does have bipartisan support. So what if people want to put a tax on carbon for a different reason? What if they don't think climate change is real, or what if they don't think it's going to fix carbon? That's okay. What if people want to support renewable energy for a different reason? That's totally fine. What if they're more interested in green as being the color of dollars versus the color of the planet? That's okay, especially when we look at the prices that we have for renewables these days. I mean, in Texas, wind and solar is already cheaper than natural gas in terms of electricity contracts. So there really is reason to have hope. It's a little bit harder if you are actually a climate scientist, I think, than anybody else. We are certainly thinking, you know, how are we going to keep on doing our research? How are we going to keep on asking these really important questions like, what's going on in West Antarctica, or up in the Arctic, or in the sensitive places of the planet? But the reality is that the science that tells us that humans are changing climate and the impacts are serious, that science is already more than 150 years old. We don't need any more new studies to tell us what we need to know, and that is that we need a price on carbon, and we need the Paris Agreement to succeed. And the Paris Agreement will continue, make no mistake. It will continue with or without the United States, because it is the only way that 195 countries around the world are going to be able to avoid the serious impacts of a changing climate. So at this time, it does make sense to grieve. It makes sense to grieve the millions of people who were not who we thought they were, and the people who have been possibly even deceived into thinking, hey, you know, this is not a big deal. We can worry about this later, or maybe it isn't even real. And we have to spend that time to acknowledge the emotions we have. But when we move on, the way to move on is not in fear, because fear just paralyzes us. It's not in anger, because anger just builds, or I should say digs deeper trenches rather than building bridges. the way to move forward is with hope and with love. And I wanted to read a quote from a Canadian politician, a guy called Jack Layton. He passed away several years ago. He was the head of the NDP party, but he wrote a letter before he died. He wrote a letter to all different groups of people all across Canada saying what he wanted to say. And he ended with what I think is a perfect statement for us to take to heart and to take into the future. And this is what he said. He said, "My friends, love is better than anger. Hope is better than fear. And optimism is better than despair. So let us be loving, let us be hopeful, and let us be optimistic, and together we'll change the world."
Thank you for that. Great. Well, let's get to the few of the questions that you and I discussed, and then we'll open up to the chat and see anything that people would like to ask in the chat thing, and then Ricky will forward questions to us and, as they come in. So I just wanted to ask you how you kept yourself centered, sane during this whole election process. You know, a lot of us felt like we were kind of being run over on a daily basis. And, you know, how did you keep track, you know, keep from losing yourself? And then is there anything that you just, in addition to your opening remarks, that you want to say about the election?
Sure. So what keeps me grounded is the fact that I work with a lot of cities and with a lot of states and with provinces too. And what I have actually seen happening the last 8 years at the level of the cities and the states and the provinces, and just for perspective, people living in cities and cities themselves are responsible for or control about 70% of the world's emissions. So when people say, oh, cities, you're just working with cities, no, we're working with where people live and where people are going to be living the most in the future. So working with cities, working with states, working with regions over the past 8 years, over the past 15 years, that is where I have seen the action. And that action has occurred regardless of federal policy. I did the biggest city level assessment for the city of Chicago that I have done to date, and that occurred under the Bush administration. I've been working with cities over the last 8 years, and they've been doing their thing regardless of what's been happening at the federal level. The Clean Power Plan really didn't impact them. So what I have seen actually happening, I think will continue the next 4 years, the next 8 years, the next 10 years, because there's significant action that is not at the federal level. But the reality, though, is that we do need federal action, too. We need action at every level. We need action at the community, at the city, at the state, at the province, and at the federal level, and internationally. So we have international action. The Paris Agreement is amazing, and it does give us hope, and it is going to continue. Even if the U.S. pulls out, legally they can't do that for 3 years, legally. But even if the U.S. does pull out temporarily, and I think it is temporary because we're seeing the impacts of climate change, and in 4 years we're just going to see more impacts of climate change. It will still continue, and they're in Marrakesh this week putting legs on that agreement. So we have the international, we have the state in many states, we have the cities, and we have the local. The only thing we're missing is the federal. And I have to add too, being from Canada, that helps a lot. People always ask, you know, aren't you a U.S. citizen? Are you going to become a U.S. citizen? And to be honest, just that little tiny bit of detachment of being from north of the border, where we have a price coming in on carbon, and we had some dark years. It's like Canada and the U.S. are like a teeter-totter or a seesaw. It's like one goes up and the other goes down. So we've had some dark years. We're in some good years now. Dark years could come in the future. But having that kind of perspective of the U.S. is not the only country in the world, and there are some amazing things going on, not just in Canada, but in China. There's amazing things going on. There's amazing things going on in India. There are incredible things going on in Africa. So there is a lot going on elsewhere. And if we look outside of our own boundaries, we can see things that give us hope even today.
Great. Okay, well, let's ask a question about you for a second, okay? So you're one of the most powerful people in the climate movement in the entire world. And you're a woman.
I feel like that most days.
Yeah. Well, you know, the majority of our staff are women, and a lot of the leadership in this organization are women. And are there, you know, challenges that you think are unique for women in leadership positions? And are there ways that we could work to empower women? You know, One of the things that's hard for me right now is my wife so wanted to see a woman president in her life, and she's not sure she will now. And that's upsetting to her. And, I still think we will in our lifetime. But can you just talk about the challenges that women face in leadership?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, first of all, I think looking at this from the climate perspective, we know that people who are poor and vulnerable and disadvantaged suffer disproportionately from the impacts of climate change compared to those who have advantages, who have resources to draw on when disaster happens. And because of the way the world works, women make up a larger proportion of the people who are disproportionately affected by a changing climate. It's not just sea level rise, it's not just changing rainfall patterns, it's not just stronger droughts. It's the impact that these events have often on political stability. And that's one of our biggest concerns moving into the future, is you have a state that is already on the edge, what they call a failing state. If something pushes it over the edge, as we've seen in Syria with the record-breaking drought they had, women and children are often at the forefront of those who suffer and who are impacted. So women have a unique role in bearing the brunt of the impacts of climate change, but at the same time, studies have shown that when women are involved in decision-making, it is much easier to come to consensus, to come to solutions that are more holistic, that address kind of the bigger picture. So that's why I love what you just said, Mark, about women being in leadership in CCLs, because we need a diversity of voices. Why is it that women are so important? It's because of diversity. We need diversity in terms of gender, but we need diversity in terms of race. We need diversity in terms of socioeconomic status, and we need diversity in terms of age. So in your chapter, make an effort to reach out to local universities and colleges. Get students involved, get young people involved, reach out to them and give them an opportunity to let their voice be heard. Because when we're young, often the number one thing we think is nobody's going to listen to me. But CCL can, by reaching out to local communities and especially local student organizations, give young people a voice, and having that diversity is so important. But third, the real question Mark asked is, what are the challenges with being a woman? Well, the challenges is that too often the circles that we move in, not CCL, but other circles, too often the circles we move in are dominated by men. I belong to the Earth Science Women's Network, and it has been a tremendous support. Thousands of women from around the world now belong to this network that was started by some of my peers, people the same age as me, to highlight the fact that we women do deal with unique issues. I certainly have experienced my share of discrimination in academia. I have incredibly supportive colleagues. My mentors are male and have supported me even more because I'm a woman rather than less. But I have dealt with some very difficult issues, and I have definitely been in situations where I know that I would not have been treated the way I was, or would have not have received the type of statements that I had if I had been a man. And what we just have to say is we have to keep on going, because things are changing. They're changing for women, they're changing for climate, they're changing for other minorities. And the hope and the love and the optimism that I talked about with Jack Layton's quote, that keeps us going with climate, but keeps us going with all of our other issues too. So.
Great, thank you. Okay, I have one quick science question, then we'll open it up to the chat a little bit. So one of the things that you said on your 2 years ago national conference is that regarding the warming that the planet is experiencing, 100% of it is attributed to burning fossil fuels. So that, I heard everything you said, but that was like, that really got my attention. Could you just say a teensy bit about that? I know you don't have the time to kind of set it up like you did there, and then we'll see what Ricky has for us in the chat.
Sure. So in my keynote address to the CCL conference a year ago last summer, I talked about what Mark just mentioned, and you can find that video on YouTube. You just look for Hayhoe and CCL, and it gets into a lot of the interesting science, what we've known for 150 years, plus what is the new stuff that we know now that we didn't know 150 years ago. One of the things we know now is the question is always, how much of the warming is human? And usually in surveys, they'll ask, do you think it's mostly natural? Do you think it's mostly human? And what I tell people when they're asking these questions is, you know what, you don't actually have the real answer there as part of the survey. And they say, what are you talking about? The reality is that if our planet's temperature were controlled right now by the sun and by natural cycles, our temperature would actually be slowly going down, because the next thing on our geologic calendar is another ice age. Warming after the last ice age already peaked, and we're on our way down. Also, energy from the sun, which kind of goes up and down randomly over time, energy from the sun has been down the last 40 years, not up. So right now, if it weren't for this human blanket we're wrapping around our planet made out of heat-trapping gases, if it weren't for this human blanket, our planet would be slowly cooling. And so what that means is not just 100% of the warming today is due to humans, more than 100% is human. And that is never a question that gets asked on surveys, because most people working in the climate field don't even realize that. So
yeah, I remember the first time you were on our call and you said we should leave the coal in the ground because we might need it one day.
Yes. There will be a day, if humans last that long, there will be a day when we actually want to burn this stuff to stave off the next ice age. And interestingly, we were actually on our way to staving off that next ice age just through the development of agriculture and deforestation. So if it wasn't for the Industrial Revolution, we might be in just the right sweet spot to keep temperature just what we like it. What's the perfect temperature for humans on this planet? It's the temperature that we've had the last couple hundred years, when we went from, a few tens of millions of people to 7 billion people. Why did population increase like this? It's because we had the perfect conditions.
Great. Ricky, are there questions from the chat that we should address?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, sure. We got a question from some guy named Steve Volk. He said,
no questions from him.
Steve asked, he makes the comment that I get the sense that until Tuesday, a lot of people concerned about climate change were sitting on the sidelines. And it seems like Tuesday was a big wake-up call for people to get involved. Is that what you're seeing?
I think Tuesday was a big wake-up call for people sitting on the sidelines of all kinds of issues. So in many ways, and I've talked about this before, I think that climate change is a casualty of bigger societal issues that we have today. The idea of detachment, that we're just observers. We're no longer actually plugged in. We're just kind of sitting, looking at our computer screens, watching the world go by. The sense that nothing we do will make a difference. And the kind of, lack of hope, the despair of being disconnected and disengaged. And then also, too, the incredible polarization that we're experiencing. We have seen, over the last 20 years in the United States, we have seen people become further and further and further apart. And so in a way, and I know this may this may sound a little strange, but in a way I feel like there has just been this boil of discontentment and frustration and fear and anger that has come to a head. And when you have such incredible negativity, and this has been happening, on both sides, it isn't just, one side or the other side issue. When you have this incredible polarization, all of this negative stuff coming to the surface, what's the best way to fix a boil? Lance it. And so that's what happened on Tuesday. I feel like that boil is lanced, and all of that awful stuff inside is coming out and spewing all over. But that is actually the first step to healing, because slapping some cover up or slapping a Band-Aid on a boil is not going to fix it. And so in some bizarre, obscure, backwards way, I feel like this actually might be the first step forward to a better future that we needed, because failing to address and acknowledge all of that negativity will not make it go away. It will just make it fester even further. So who knows?
I'll just add a couple of anecdotal pieces. Usually on Wednesdays, we have an introductory call, and there's between 15 and 25 people on it. Last Wednesday, there were 70. And Diogo Freire is out doing his film tour and thought that his events that have been having about 20 people would be canceled, and the next two had 80 people. So there's some indication that people are going, holy cow, I need to find some avenue to do something. Ricky, what else?
Oh, and also I'll just say, our web traffic has more than doubled over the last 3 days. So
wow,
that's been pretty incredible to see as well. So I think there is evidence out there that people are getting involved. There's another question from Rick, and this has to do with just a comment. See if you had any comments about the children's suit against the federal government that was just approved by a federal court. Just gave a ruling on that. Do you have any comments on that, Katharine?
My only comment is just that this is a great example of how there is so much action happening at every different level. The federal government is only one level, and I'm going to be totally honest. If Hillary Clinton had won the presidency But if the Senate and the House in the United States had remained Republican, what would have been her chances of having any meaningful climate policy passed? Probably not that much. So the whole point is, in this election, there wasn't really the genuine hope per se right now of having federal climate policy, especially if it came from the Democrats and was opposed by the Republicans. Now, the Republicans controlling all three, presidency, House, and Senate. Hey, if there's Republicans in the bipartisan caucus who stand up and say, hey, time for a Republican solution. Let's talk Republican solutions. Who knows? There could be even more meaningful action at the federal level. But there's all kinds of stuff happening with the children's suit, with cities, with states, with what was going on in Florida, where they voted down that bill that would have actually been against rooftop solar versus for it. There's a lot going on, and I think that that's one great example. So. Yeah,
and I just to add that the judge ruling that case could go forward with our Children's Trust in Washington State, that is significant. Nobody knows how this works out. Everybody has to do what they believe is the best thing to do and work their butt off every day trying to do it. But we don't know. Maybe that lawsuit will be what is what is the key. We'll see. Yes. Ricky, what else do you have there?
That's it. Most of the other questions are sort of regional and specific, so that's pretty much it for Dr. Hayhoe.
Okay, Katharine, anything else that you want to say today?
Sure. I know that everybody has probably been checking out our Global Weirding series, and I just wanted to thank you all because what happened was our local PBS station in West Texas came to me and said, hey, we would love to do a PBS digital series, and we would love to do it with you. We are going to donate our time in terms of, production, filming, everything like that. But we need a little budget to pay for, the cartoons and the production and all that kind of stuff. So would you mind starting an Indiegogo campaign? So we started it and we thought, we'll try to fund one season. We'll try to get $10,000 to fund one season. And then I told Mark about it and he put the word out on CCL. We didn't just get enough money to fund one season. We got enough money to fund 2 whole seasons plus a little bit of extra. Nice. So thanks to CCL, Global Weirding is up and running. We release a new video every 2 weeks. We've gotten great write-ups in The Guardian and Slate Magazine, which has just been fantastic. So you can find us at globalweirdingseries.com, or you can also just look on my Facebook page. And I have a live chat. I've started doing a live Facebook chat the day after each episode is released. So it's released on a Wednesday, and I do live chat on the Thursday. And it's been awesome. We've been getting like 2,000 people tuning in to watch the video, which is just crazy. So Global Weirding, spread the news. It's one of the ways that we can start the conversation. Every video is tiny, 3 to 6 minutes. And you know me, they're not going to be controversial. They're not going to get people's backs up. They're all just about asking questions and starting conversations. So please take advantage of this because you guys made this happen. Thank you.
All right, you're the best. And if you can stay on the next 10 minutes while we go over a couple things, great. If you have to drop off, we will obviously understand that. Ricky, can you open up Lene's line? I'd like to have our development director, Lene Pettengill, come on for just a moment. One of the things you'll see on the U.S. action sheet is to support our Giving Tuesday. We got a $150,000 matching grant from a group of women that we call Women Who Will. If you're any one of those people, thank you so much for making that matching grant possible. Ricky, is Lene there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. And let me say one thing about you before you come on. Everybody should be so lucky to work with someone like Lene. I work with her every day, and this is somebody who every day makes it fun to do her job, every day brings her A game, and never makes excuses, just tries to bring everything she has every day, and everybody should be so lucky to work with the person I get to work with every day. Lene, go ahead.
Thanks, Mark. So as Mark's discussed on the call today and in his written message to you this week, our volunteers, our methodology, our solution are still our best hope for a healthy climate for generations to come. Giving Tuesday is one of our most important fundraising tools we use to support our climate solution work. And this year it comes with an incredible opportunity, a $150,000 matching grant that will double all gifts received from now until Giving Tuesday, which is November 29th this year. This matching grant was provided by an amazing, generous group of women, 15 women, and they call themselves the Women Who Will. Love that name. The more details are on your action sheet, The bottom line here is that there is no better time to make your tax-deductible donation to our work, and also to ask your friends and family to do the same. Every gift you make will be matched dollar for dollar up to $150,000. And we need to reach that number to take full advantage of this incredible opportunity. And given who's listening right now, I think we will. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lene. Appreciate that so much. Okay, so if you're in Canada, you should have a Canadian action sheet. If you're in the US, you should have a US action sheet. In Canada, we're asking you to study the Leave Behind for the lobbying in November. We're going to be in Ottawa again to comment on the Canadian budget and fill in the choice book. In the US, we're asking everybody to support Giving Tuesday, and that the fact that we have that matching grant is really, really helpful. You'll notice also that we have something where you can sign up for a action alert by text. So if you sign up for that, which there's a link on the action sheet, it's not like we're going to send you a text and say, hey, read this article. It's that something important needs to happen in Congress and something that needs to happen immediately. And we'd like to have as many people as possible available when something comes along that we can send out an alert and say, here's what needs to happen. And then also, please make sure you practice the laser talk in this month's action sheet. Okay, a couple other things. So of the 289 people that are going to be in DC on Tuesday, 111 of them are group leaders. 43 states are representative. 36 state coordinators are there, 14 regional coordinators, and 109 liaisons. So there's going to be a lot of people in DC on Tuesday. Wherever you are with respect to Tuesday, wherever your reaction response is at this point, I just want you to know that you should be where you are, not where you think you should be. You know, some people think because you're part of CCL, you have some obligation to be optimistic or cheerful or positive all the time. That's just not true. You ought to be where you are. And I think we should all celebrate that we're in a culture that allows us to move through these things together with people who will be supportive of that. I want to go back to 2009 for just a moment. In 2009, I joined CCL in March. And in June of 2009 was the vote on Waxman-Markey. Nothing happened in the Senate, and people in the climate movement were generally very discouraged. And Marshall and I joined a call on Mondays of a group of people who believed that they needed a clear, transparent price on carbon. And they were Washington insiders, and they'd been working on this for decades, and some of them ran think tanks, and one of them was a lobbyist, and some of them ran Washington NGOs, and they knew everybody. And Marshall and I called them the smart guys, because they talk about things like price collars. And Marshall and I would look at each other and say, what on earth is that? And they'd say things like, well, Dallas said this and Dallas said that. We didn't know who Dallas was. We didn't know if it was a man or a woman. We didn't know if they were talking about the city. You know, eventually we began to learn those things, but it was a real education. And one of the things everybody would say on that call every week is we need a bill, we need a bill, we need a bill. And it was mostly a bunch of angry old men yelling at each other about we needed a bill. And one day on one of those calls, Lori Williams, who was one of the few women who would attend the call, said softly from the back of the room, I'll write the bill. To me, it was almost like that Lord of the Rings moment when Frodo said, I'll take the ring. So Lori Williams said, I'll write the bill. And so she wrote a 7-page draft, and she sent it to Marshall and I. And at that point, the office was me, Marshall, and Olivia. And we printed it out, and Marshall got out his red pen, and we started going through it. We said, yeah, okay, this works, and well, we really don't need that. And what we ended up with was a 2-page bill. And that's almost exactly what you see when you look at our draft proposal was what was written. And so we sent it out to our volunteers, and I remember being at tabling events, and our volunteers so proudly and happily saying, we have a bill, and they would hold it up. They'd say, we have a bill. And it was just this remarkable, exciting thing. And then some of those people on that Monday call told us, you can't say that. You can't say you have a bill. Only Congress can say they have a bill. And Marshall and I were embarrassed and humiliated, and we wanted to go hide under our beds for about a month because we thought we'd been made out to be, you know, a bunch of yo-hos who didn't know anything. Because the, quote, insiders, experts said that you can't say that. And, you know, Marshall had always said what we needed here was a lot of audacity. And we felt like almost like our permission to be audacious had been yanked. Here's what I want you to tell people when you talk to them. I want you to tell them we have a bill. That's exactly what I want you to tell them. We have a bill when they ask you about that. and that we're committed to getting it passed. I also want you to know one other thing. This is my country. This is my country that I love. And the other thing that I want you to know is my promise is still my promise. That is not in any way changed for me from what happened on Tuesday. So for everybody who I'll see in DC on Monday, I'm looking forward to that. Katharine, thank you so much for making yourself available. Ricky, if you could unmute everybody's lines so we could thank Dr. Hayhoe for joining us on this Saturday, I'd appreciate that. So thank you all so much for being there and all you're doing. Go ahead. Thank you, Katharine.